The name of this institution, the Frick Collection, says everything about it. It's the feeling of setting, that we're not just seeing objects in isolation, we're seeing objects in a domestic interior.
You walk in and you have the sense that you're seeing the house as Frick left it when he died.
This was a collection associated with one man whose name was synonymous with great quality, with the highest possible quality. Henry Clay Frick was the grandson of a whiskey distiller. He had very little formal education, but from early on had a talent for figures. He started life as a sort of high-level shop assistant, and he was also interested in works of art.
And he was a sickly child, so he was not robust physically, but he was very ambitious.
He saw around him the potential to become involved with Coke because the steel industry was just beginning to take off in Pittsburgh. By the time he was 30, he had already become a millionaire.
This enterprise proved so lucrative that he ultimately sold a good deal of it to Andrew Carnegie, and he became a partner in Carnegie Brothers.
In 1881, Henry Clay Frick marries Adelaide Childs, and they start a family. They have a daughter, Helen, a son, Charles Frick, and two other children who die in childhood. He creates Clayton, a grand house in the best part of Pittsburgh.
In Pittsburgh, he began collecting works by local artists. His early collection doesn't show a spirit of adventure, it shows a spirit of someone who loved pictures.
It's impressive and part of the American dream to come from such a humble background and to develop into a titan of industry.
His business relationship with Carnegie was not exactly smooth, and of course the Homestead strike in 1892.
He was the one, with Carnegie coaching, who hired Pinkerton mercenaries to break up the strike at the Homestead steel plant. Frick was hated in Pittsburgh because of that strike. And while the big breakup with Carnegie didn't come until 1899, the Homestead strike was the turning point. And I think that influenced his desire to leave Pittsburgh, to come to New York, to have a different life.
At this point, Frick is enormously wealthy. He's now in his mid-50s. He rents a very, very grand house that belonged to the Vanderbilts.
And he begins at that time to get caught up with the chase for the old masters. The market was just opening. And also he's stepping into a larger arena.
Frick buys a property on Fifth Avenue, a whole block front, which is an amazing thing to be able to do.
When Frick moved into his house, which was built between 1913 and 1914, he wanted the focus to be on the pictures, and that was something that he worked out very clearly with the interior designer that he chose, Sir Charles Allam.
And we know that he intended for the house to become a museum, even though he did not tell his architect, Thomas Hastings.
The popular press covered art collecting and art purchases much more avidly in the days of Henry Clay Frick than they do today.
J.P. Morgan died in the spring of 1913. Morgan's son decided that he wanted to sell a large group of works, and they were put on exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum for about 2 years. Frick went shopping.
And when he is told that the great Fragonard series can be acquired, he does not hesitate to enter into another year of disruption and upheaval to recreate a Fragonard room in what had previously been a drawing room.
After the purchase of the Fragonard Room panels, Henry Clay Frick selected the best of J. Pierpont Morgan's Renaissance bronzes, Chinese porcelains, and Limoges enamels.
Because it wasn't enough simply to have a great collection of old master paintings, he began to buy outstanding furniture and decorative arts as well.
What separates Henry Clay Frick's collecting of old masters from those of many of his peers is that he did refine his collection.
He is drawn to great, great works of art.
He preferred serene pictures, mostly portraits and landscapes. He loved portraits of beautiful women.
He wanted works that were pleasant to live with, and the works that he purchased fit this domestic environment very, very beautifully.
Even though he doesn't talk much about his feelings for the works of art, they were a source of enormous emotional satisfaction. And he would go to the West Gallery at night just to look at the pictures and to walk around. Where one feels closest to Mr. Frick is in the living hall, which is installed almost exactly as it was when he lived here. And it was he who chose that disposition of the Holbeins on either side of the El Greco and the Titians on either side of the Bellini. The Fricks moved into the house in November of 1914. He died in December of 1919. So he only had 5 years here. He stipulated in his will that the museum be created upon his death in 1919, but that his wife be able to live in the house until her death, and she lived until 1931.
But in order to convert the house into a museum, a new architectural campaign had to take place, and the trustees hired John Russell Pope.
What John Russell Pope did was to enclose what had been a carriageway that ran from 70th Street to 71st Street, and to create an entrance hall reception area, to create the Oval Room, the East Gallery, and the music room.
The largest, in some ways the most dramatic transformation is to create an inner sanctum, the garden court, that for many people is the heart of the Frick collection.
Visitors are always fascinated to discover that the garden court was once this driveway from 70th Street to 71st Street. And I think they're surprised because it's so effortless, it's so of a piece, that you almost can't imagine what the Frick collection would be without that central gathering place.
John Russell Pope also designed the new library, the Frick Art Reference Library, which Helen Clay Frick founded the year after her father's death in 1920.
So in a way, the footprint almost doubled in scale, but the house remained intact and remained very much the way it was in Frick's day. But now there was simply enough room to spread the collection out, to add further acquisitions, and to accommodate the public, to turn it into a museum.
The New York Times and the other newspapers quoted visitors as having been astonished by the treasures that they found within these walls.
They would go through a collection that was not organized by school, but in which all the various schools, the Italian and the French, Spanish, etc., were intermixed. One of the great things that Frick gave to this museum was the opportunity to add to it. And he conceived of it as a living institution, one that would develop after his lifetime.
And his daughter was the leading proponent of additions.
She buys the early Italian paintings, the Piero della Francesca, the Duccio.
I think most of the educational activities have grown out of the educational mission that Frick declared in his will.
He said that he wanted to create this collection so that the entire public shall forever have access. There's been a continuous tradition of fellows, of scholars doing research and study and publication here.
Exhibitions are a very, very important part of the life of the Frick, both large-scale ones and little in-focus exhibitions around just one painting.
There's a kind of freedom when you come to the Frick, where you can come and you can study the pictures, you can come and you can study the furniture, but you can also drift through inhaling the Gilded Age, or you can drift through and feel uplifted by a sense of the aesthetic and the beautiful.
I think the founder, the personality of the founder, the history of the founder and his family is very strong here. It's the reason we are here.
And while he sought the opinions of people he trusted, in the end he made the decisions himself. I think that is why the collection has so much personality and why it's so great.